Boxing King Media in association with Boxer Dominic Ingle. Dom, it's been a while. I thought I'd come and catch up with you. A lot's happened in the boxing world since. So first of all, how you been and where you been? What have you been up to?
Just had a bit of time off after Kilbrook. Kill had that win against Khan, and we had a bit of downtime. People have been training, but it's been relatively quiet on the boxing scene for me. But sometimes a rest is a good thing.
It sure is. Before we get cracking, I want to just plug your meal plan book that you've been selling recently, and just let the fans know where they can get it from if they want to look like Dominic Ingle, the secret recipes on what to eat, etc. Where can they get the hold of that?
Yeah, you can search it online. You'll either get it on Apple Books, Dominic Ingle Real Food, or Blurb Books, Dominic Ingle Real Food. If you just Google it, Dominic Ingle Real Food, it comes up with a plan. And we're getting into the summer now, and people start thinking about the holidays maybe 2 weeks before they go. But if you're going to go away in the summer holidays, the time to start getting in shape is now. So get online and get the book bought.
Top man. Right, first subject, obviously the big fight of the weekend. 94,000 people in attendance. Dillian Whyte, Tyson Fury. Just before we talk about the fight, how did you think it was going to go prior to the fight actually happening?
I never thought Dillian Whyte was going to beat Tyson Fury, and that's no disrespect to Dillian Whyte. He's a very difficult man to beat, Tyson Fury. You go back to when he boxed Klitschko, and don't forget this is when Klitschko gave after Tyson beat him. Klitschko gave Joshua a very good fight, but you would say that Tyson beat Klitschko when he was really riding high, and then he got the ban. He had inactivity for 2.5 years, so. For Dillian Whyte to beat Tyson, the ideal time would have been to try and get him in that time frame between, beating Klitschko and get him on the comeback trail when Tyson was making the comeback, because he took a few fights to find his feet. But no disrespect to Dillian Whyte, it's just a very, very tall order for any fighter.
Did you, in fact, we'll talk about it as we talk about the fight. So the event in itself, what did you think of that? Biggest attendance ever in Europe as a whole. I know you don't watch a lot of late night boxing, but I'm pretty sure you stayed up and watched that.
You know what? I didn't stay up and watch it. I watched the highlights of it the next day. I love my sleep, and I think for me it was a foregone conclusion anyway. And it was a fantastic crowd that people turn out. It captured the nation's imagination, and that's what boxing's all about: getting the numbers into a big stadium like Wembley. The casual fans, the hardened fans, every Tom, Dick and Harry watched that fight. And, people obviously went to watch it in Wembley Arena. It was a great spectacle, and fair play to, Frank Warren for putting on such a great show. Because usually we're only used to people like Eddie Hearn putting on them kind of fights. And, if you've got the right fighter, which obviously Frank has with Tyson, he's a lovable character, everybody knows him. And, I was in my car a few times and I heard it coming on radio and in the newspaper. It was big news. I mean, years ago, we used to get that with Nigel Benn and Eubank and all that, and it's kind of died off over recent years. But, Tyson Fury was getting mentioned all radio stations, all kinds of media, national media. So it was great. It was a great spectacle, and it keeps boxing going for a bit longer, and that's why it's probably a little bit disappointing that he's mentioning, retiring, because he's got to the pinnacle and he's kind of going to throw it all in. And we need people like Tyson Fury in boxing to keep the interest going.
100%. Bell goes first round. Dillian Whyte comes out Southpaw. What were you thinking when you saw that?
I just don't know why people think that. He probably saw Tyson Fury training Southpaw and doing pad Southpaw and thought, I'll negate that by going Southpaw. And it's not the way to do it. It's not what you do. You got to stick at what you're good at. And Dillian Whyte is not, capable of boxing from the Southpaw stance. Tyson Fury's done full fights boxing Southpaw. Dillian Whyte hasn't, and it's never going to be an advantage. You put yourself at a disadvantage. So straight away the alarm bells are ringing. You think, who's telling him to do that? What's going through his mind? You've got to stick to what you're good at, and that's kind of where the fight's lost. When you've got into somebody's head so much, they've actually come out, in a stance they're not familiar with, or not even really comfortable, or not even good at. You've got into him straight away, and Tyson must have been smiling to himself.
And how did you think the fight played out, the way, the 5-6 rounds went? I think one of the judges actually gave Dillian 2 of the rounds, or maybe 3, I think.
For me, I think Tyson, won every round. It wasn't a lot happening. But for a come-forward fighter like Dillian Whyte, it's very frustrating to be in with somebody like Tyson Fury who's throwing feints and tapping you and not letting you get your shots off. And you kind of start throwing shots out of frustration. That big overhand right, he threw all the hooks. That kind of frustration shots. And Tyson kind of lulled him in, tormented him a little bit. I don't think he really threw any uppercuts until the uppercut what knocked him out. So he kind of got Dillian comfortable, tip-tapping him, feinting, making him move, keeping active. And, we know Dillian Whyte likes to engage. He likes being close and on top of you, throwing his shots and letting his shots work. And that's where he's effective. He's never effective on the outside, waiting to land, shots or trying to outbox somebody. He's not. He's got to get on your chest. He's got to start throwing. And Tyson never allowed that. And then from out of nowhere, Tyson just kind of pulled out the uppercut and it clipped him. I personally, I'd like to see the left hook hit Dillian Whyte before he went down, but he kind of hit him and shoved him, which he didn't really need to do, but I think the shot was damaging enough. But it was just all wrong for Dillian, Tyson Fury, because when you think about it, Tyson's always fighting guys around Dillian Whyte's weight and height, apart from Klitschko and Wilder, and when you think about it, they were the two fighters who gave Tyson the most trouble, realistically. Other fights, all right, people will argue and say there were other fighters what gave Tyson problems, but maybe because Tyson hadn't prepared properly. I think he was his own worst enemy at that stage. But when you think about the Wilder fights, the trilogy and how it went, I think they were the hardest fights that Tyson had, and I think anybody after that are not going to compare. So, Dillian Whyte's fighting a guy who's 6'8", he outreaches him, he's awkward. He's never come up and had that experience of fighting somebody like Tyson. He's never had practice to do it. So the first time he's got in with Tyson, he's kind of clueless, and no disrespect to Dillian, but he did kind of look, basic and like he wasn't the fighter that he's supposed to be. He just didn't really have a clue how to deal with Tyson, but then again, not many people do. So, he's got a payday, and it was a great spectacle. I think a lot of people thought that Dillian was going to land the big shot and connect with Tyson, but that's just a big mistake. Very few people do, land big shots, apart from Wilder, who had the reach, the range, wasn't afraid to take a shot. He had the reach to it, whereas Dillian Whyte's always going to be overreaching for shots.
And with that, with the way the fight played out, do you think that was a case of Tyson just maybe working his way through the rounds, or do you think he was just biding his time? How did you think? What was his plan? Yeah,
I'm saying that's what I think he did. I think he just, bided his time. He knows Dillian's a come forward fighter, very active. He likes to get his shots off, throw lots of shots, and realistically, Tyson slowed his work rate down by holding him, leaning on him, and then keeping away from him and making Dillian walk around and chase him. And Tyson was just enjoying himself, flicking out the jab to keep him off, feinting to keep him off, never really doing anything, and then stinging him with jabs. And it is frustrating. It will be frustrating for fighters like Dillian Whyte, that happening to him, because they're used to fighters engaging with them, and Tyson didn't. So he kind of did it at his own pace, his own canter, and kind of hit Dillian at will. And any time Dillian got in close, Tyson just tied him up and negated everything. He tried to get a little bit rough inside Dillian, but he wasn't really landing anything clean. He never landed anything on Tyson to worry him. And the more that goes on in a fight, the more frustrating it's going to be for Dillian, because they don't mind getting hit as long as they're landing, but he was getting hit and he wasn't landing. And then he kind of makes mistakes and starts taking risks when he shouldn't, and that's when Tyson caught him.
You touched on it there, the push just before just after the uppercut. Dillian's come out today and said, he felt the referee should have given him more time because he bumped his head on the floor. What do you make of them comments?
Look, it's a split second decision for the referee, and it's kind of difficult for the referee to not rule that a knockdown because he was pushed, and he was pushed in a way, but I think the shot did the damage. But imagine if the shot did do the damage, and then the referee said, well, it was a push, we're going to give you more time, and he gave Dillian more time. At that point, I don't think he's going to recover, and he's only letting himself in for a worse knockout, where at least he managed to climb off the floor. If his head banged the floor that hard, how can we manage to climb up off the floor? It was a heavy shot. And now imagine if the referee had given him more time, and Dillian had come back round again, it would have been worse for him, because Tyson had got him within his sights, and Dillian wouldn't have fully recovered from that. So it would probably be a worse knockout where he would have probably been slept. So, that's the kind of decision the referee has to make.
Sound. And obviously there's been a lot of talk about Fury and where he stands in the all-time list. Where do you class Fury now in the all-time list of heavyweights? And also, is there a heavyweight in this current era that you think is capable of beating him?
No, I mean, look, different eras, different types, different fighters. Heavyweights are much bigger now than they were back in the day. We're talking, Muhammad Ali, Mike Tyson. Tyson was only 15 and a half stone. He was a little powerhouse. and he went through the big guys. It's different eras. Yeah, for me, it's difficult to compare because I'm not a massive fan of the heavyweights. All I will say, in the last, probably since Lennox Lewis, I would say, I know the Klitschko's were dominant, but they had the height and reach over everybody, more or less. With the exception of a few fighters. All right, Corey Sanders was a tall guy, he beat one of the Klitschko's, but they kind of dominated the division for a lot of years, both of the brothers. And it wasn't until really Tyson Fury came along that we saw a change from that. And, you think he had 2.5 years out on his ban, that allowed Anthony Joshua to come through. And you think of the life and death that Joshua had with Dillian Whyte with each other before he finished him off. It does make you wonder that you would want to see the fight between Tyson Fury and Joshua, or Tyson Fury against Usyk. And people say to me, I think Usyk might have the beating of Tyson Fury. I don't think he would at all, because Tyson knows how to deal with southpaws, and all the trickiness that Usyk's got. Tyson would deal with that, negate it, and beat him. So we have to see where what kind of decision that Tyson makes, whether he's going to make a comeback or he's going to let everybody else fight it out between themselves. But you've just got to give Tyson credibility and a lot of kudos for the where he's come from after all the stuff what's gone wrong in his life, the mental illness, the ban, the ups and downs in his career, really to get himself back on top of the pile, beat everybody, and then fill Wembley Arena out on Saturday. You've got to take your hat off to him. He's come through a lot, and it would be the right time probably now to pack up his bags and finish on a high.
And just finishing on Tyson, I know he's been in the Ingle gym years ago, and I know he's a big fan of your dad as well. Any memory you want to share with us from Tyson coming here back in the day?
No, he came when he was 16 or 17. Sport Johnny Nelson came down with his dad, and over the years he came to sport the likes of Richard Towers and Cash Allis and other guys. And my dad went in John's corner a few times when he was a pro. So the connection goes way back. Tyson came down here a few times, and he's picked up bits and bats from everybody. He's been around the world. He's had Emmanuel Stewart. He had a bit by my dad, and he's learned. He's one of those clever fighters. So like I say, I just remember him sparring Richard Towers a few times, and they were always good spars. Richard Towers they were very good spars with Richard Towers. That's when he was a novice. But you think where Tyson's climbed to since the Mick Hennessy days and boxing on Channel 4, you think of his journey there. And how he's come through all that adversity, and got himself on top of the pile. You've got to take your hat off to him, but obviously a great fighter, and it'd be interesting to see what he's going to do now.